My name is Mark Earhart. I'll be your host today. I'll be monitoring the chat for questions. And I'm joined by Vivek Bhatnagar, the CTO and co-founder of UnifyCloud, to share with you an overview of landing zones and landing zone automation using UnifyCloud. I will say before we jump in that this session will be recorded and a link will be sent to all those that registered after the event, and that recording is available. Again, if you have any questions that come up during the event, please post them there in the chat, and we'll most likely wait till the end of the presentation to get to those. But we appreciate your input and want to make sure that we answer all of your questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Vivek and let him get started.
Okay, but thank you, Mark. Good morning, good evening. Thank you for taking time and join this webinar of Landing Zone. My name is Vivek. So I'm going to talk about the concept of landing zone for next 40 minutes. Then I'm going to leave ample of time, like 10 to 15 minutes or more, based on questions I see in chat, to discuss your questions. Landing zone is one of the very important concept to understand for everyone who is working on making customer successful in cloud, or helping customer to move to cloud and help them in using the cloud platform. I will, throughout this presentation, I will use an analogy of a house to explain the different landing zone concepts. Typically, in a very, very simple term, landing zone is nothing but an Azure environment that you create or build to hold your application infrastructure or anything in Azure. So this is kind of a, as an analogy of the house. This is going to you are going to have as a house to hold people. Similarly, you're going to create an Azure environment to create or to hold your application data and all other assets. And taking the same analogy, whenever you start building a house, you decide that what kind of building you are going to build. So you basically think about a house or maybe a stadium or a bridge. These all are buildings, but these buildings are entirely different purpose. They stand for different timing. They have different importance. So the point which I am bringing is that whenever you start building Azure environment, it basically depends on what you are going to host or hold in those environments. And similarly, taking the same analogy, because these are different buildings, they have different foundation, they actually have a different code you build. So if you build a house, you follow a code which is given to you by your local bodies and corporations and all. But if you are building a bridge and stadium for that purpose, you follow a different code. These buildings have different life. House typically supposed to last for 50 to 60 years. And then a stadium and a bridge may last up to 100 years. So this is the point. Is all these things need a certain code, certain best practices that you follow to build. Similarly, we follow a code, a certain best practices, a certain guide rails when we build an environment on Azure. And it's very important to understand that those priority, those codes and all these, typically these codes and things are not are basically given and based on what kind of business you are going to serve. So in case you are serving a business which need a high availability, more disaster recovery and all, then you have to build an Azure environment as per that code. Or if you are just building a simple environment to host a particular non-critical web applications, then you can have those kinds of best practices. So you need to align your Azure environment, first of all, to the business priorities. You definitely need to do the regular cloud design consideration. For example, subscriptions, then disaster recoveries, your backups and all those things. You also need to follow a cloud operating model. Which type of, like, is it a centralized cloud operating model where you are running everything from one, or you have a decentralized model? Based on that, you can organize your subscription. You also need to focus what kind of cloud applications you are hosting. For example, there would be a different kind of landing zone if you host only Microsoft workload, but if you are hosting like workload like SAP or Oracle along with your Microsoft workload, then you need a different type of landing zone, or you may need to grow your landing zone and expand it to hold those kinds of applications. Definitely, it has to be compliant with whatever things we are committing, or you are committing to a customer. For example, if you are storing credit card information, the landing zone need to comply with PCI. If you are, holding healthcare data of patient providers and all, then maybe standards, maybe high tech or HIPAA standards need to follow. So different compliance standards also become part of it. And the basic consideration, definitely, that it should be agile environment, so you can actually adjust it very, very fast based on your changing business priorities, based on new best practices, based on the cloud design consideration. And also, like, it should be like security, and you should be always be using one of the best and latest services available. So with this knowledge, let's start to define landing zone. And basically, when we talk about Azure landing zone and how to create a landing zone, it is mean that we are helping customer to set up their Azure environment for scale, security, governance, networking, and identity. Sometime I tell, like, landing zone is combination when we apply Azure Cloud Adoption Framework with Azure well-architected frameworks with the skills, and we build the Azure environment. That's where we call it like this, building a landing zone. And the purpose of landing zone definitely is to enable to hold your applications, to basically let you perform your business functions or let you support your customers. So this is just a basic definition of landing zone we are trying to define, and we take a couple of more slides to position it. In case you want to understand at what stage we start thinking about landing zone, then it's basically is the part of the ready phase. So when you define your strategy, when you basically list your requirements, you understand what kind of workloads you're going to put in cloud, and you start planning for those workload. And after your planning and strategy thing completed, you start building the landing zone, you start designing landing zone, then you start putting things in landing zone. So that's kind of a landing zone part, which also bring us like what is the prerequisite steps of landing zone. So before we build a landing zone, we should be very, very clear that what is basically our like business requirements, what's our business justifications, what have we defined our SLAs, do we understand our applications, have we collected all the inventories, do we understand what customer are looking for, do we have a security definition defined, do we know what compliance we have to follow, do we have a costing model already defined, do we understand how we're going to monitor the environment, how we are going to basically secure the environment based on the compliance standard agreed. So these are a few of the prerequisite. And in case the customer is not very much clear about these, then you have to make sure they understand these prerequisite and they answer you, or they basically tell you what to do. In case you want to assess the readiness for building a landing zone, then you can actually go and basically use one of the assessment survey given by Microsoft. So you can actually go ahead and do this assessment survey, which will actually systematically ask you these questions and make sure that it's going to assess the readiness of the whole thing. Okay, with now, like, we have understood what is landing zone. So we understand that it's an Azure environment that we build as per the specification code to hold our applications and infrastructure and other assets. But why we talk about so much about landing zone, why it is so important to talk while in the context of migration modernization. So the reason we talk a lot more about landing zone, because it is one of the most, I should say, like, this is based off more than like 5,000 engagements that we have done in last couple of years. Uh, we we have spoken to hundreds of partners in all the geographies, and majority of them listed landing zone is one of the top blockers. So when customers finish their assessment, they are all ready to go to Azure, and they say, let's go to Azure. They start building the landing zone, and which just takes like longer than expected. People think that they would be ready in month of in just maybe a couple of weeks, but sometime it is becoming couple of months. And it's a very difficult thing, as partners are saying. They're saying that as if we can provide a help to accelerate somehow landing zone, that's where like all can impact a project. So that's why we invested in landing zone. Another thing, and the purpose of automation built around landing zone is to reduce the time to go to the cloud. So like you can actually move your application thing faster than ever. Basically reduce the large deployment cycle, reduce the, I should say, sometime like paralysis of analysis, reconfirm. This whole thing will uh, reconfirm what customer is asking for. You can easily talk to the security and audit guys of your customer. So these are like some of the benefits of landing zone automation, and that's the reason why we built it. If we try to define unified cloud landing zone, and so I try to, this is kind of a definition that we think about. The unified cloud landing zone is an architectural approach and design principle and patterns which enable you effectively construction operationalization of an Azure landing zone. So this is what we built using unified cloud tools, which is particularly landing zone tool. You can basically build Azure landing zone, we say at scale, aligned with the best practices of Azure, aligned with your requirement, and as per the Azure roadmap. Okay, so this is just defining the whole effort or the whole tool that which you built from Unify Cloud. If we keep talking about, like, with this definition, the areas there, which we are mostly focused around, and there is a lot of guidance around this. You can find on Microsoft websites. You can also find a lot of guidance in our tools. But like the main topics are always the same, like networking. How do you construct the network on Azure? Whether you need a VPN or multiple VPN, you need a hub structure, you need a spoke. You need to do network peering, and what all needed. How do you define and manage your networking? What options you have? How do you organize your resources? What governance principle you have to do? How the operational baseline need to do, and other things like deployment options and all. So going through all these options, and we try to automate your journey, or we try to navigate you while you select these options, and we're trying to make it little simpler for you to select these options and then scale the creation of Azure landing zone. You can always read each one of them in detail and try to build yourself or try to find your own way. But we are trying to help you navigate these all options and help you in scaling the whole landing zone. So these are like few things I build. I also want to give you an idea of collecting the right data for landing zone, because whenever we say landing zone, and as you can see that it is a part of the readiness phase, it means that you should at least do the data collection and the planning phase correctly. And so I just want to be sure that you guys understand what I mean by a data collection. So data collection start with definitely, you collect, for example, you take the first step is you use tools like Mover, or you tools like Azure Migrate. You can use like other tools like Block 64 or CloudAtlas. These are data collection tools, and they collect infrastructure data. And some of them can do a little bit more than data collection, but primarily they will give you infrastructure data. They will tell you all VMs and other things. So the first piece of data that you will collect in your modernization and migration journey is infrastructure utilization data. And once you have this data, and I believe that majority of us can get it like you from Azure Migrate or Mover or CloudAtlas or Block 64 or any other tool, then we add a very important data on top of it is basically licensing data. Licensing data means like in case customer has already licenses for Microsoft or Oracle or SAP or whatever workload they are going to run on top of cloud, do they have the licenses already purchased? Because this will make an impact when you start deploying these things in the cloud on the cost side of it. So these two are a basic data, and I'm assuming if you are doing any assessment, you have this data. The third data which we typically add on top of it is nothing but like data state. So means like you collect little bit detailed data about your database which you are hosting, what kind of data you are storing, is it a relational data or like hierarchical database or different kind of database, but focus mostly on data which may be like organized or unorganized data. And then basically about your applications. So how many applications you are going to have, are they basically built, what kind of technologies, .NET, Java, Spring Cloud, mainframe application, other thing, how you are deploying them, what have you scanned, like, do you know about their like deployment and that aspect. So these are the four pieces of data basically, which I believe that you will be collecting using different tools. Data and apps tools, typically UnifyCloud offer Cloud Pilot tool for you to do it. Once you have these basic building data, then there is another piece of data which is called like modernization data. It means that you understand that what kind of databases are currently on premise and how you are going to take them to the cloud. For example, like if you're using SQL Server on a virtual machine on premise, then you have an option to use, for example, SQL MI or SQL Azure or different type of data. You can always use a VM too. So is thinking about data modernization, the way you are taking data, your approach for this is important. Similarly, thinking about the same thing on application side is another important thing, which will lead you to another piece of important data, which we call a dependency data. So here you have infrastructure dependency, and you can always convert into this dependency data into application dependencies and understand that what components are together. So these all pieces of information actually go and then help you in creating the landing zone environment. So if you want to create a secure landing zone, you want to make sure that your Azure environment is ready to hold your applications, to hold your databases and everything. Then these are the 7 pieces of I should say important data has to go, which will help you in building the data for landing zone. And then basically you would be ready to go to the cloud, and also will help in a successful migration and other aspect of these things. So I'm just trying to give you an idea about like what all you need before you start building a landing zone. You can do it in a systematic fashion, or you can use like different tools, but like you need to think about these pieces of data. Okay, now we have established what is landing zone. We have established what is landing zone in context of Azure Cloud Framework. We have established what's the advantage of landing zone and why it is important. We have seen the pieces of information you need to build a landing zone. Then let's think about like how UC can help you in building landing zone. So the thing which we are thinking that we will help you with the landing zone automation, so help you to apply the Azure best practices, Azure, to build this Azure environment. So we actually start applying a different services or I think different knowledge that we already have understood from Microsoft or from our engagements. So we start building Azure environment which is governed by Azure policy. So like Azure policy is one of the key driving framework to build this environment. Whether you need to be building a simple, it's kind of a written code for building a house. You have to follow a code. For example, if you are building a house in an area where I live in US, and then I have to follow the district or county building code to follow because I live in here. If I'm building a house in a coastal area, then there's a different code. So Azure policy kind of a defined code for these things. We also have a lot of design patterns and templates which we have stored in our repository, or we understand how these can be used. So we automate setup of like multiple Azure accounts. Like it may be simpler, it may be just one subscription, it may be multiple subscription governed through a management groups, and how we organize it. We'll allow you to put these all information in form of in a GUI, apply Azure best practices, and help you navigation with making all these important decisions, hide complexity around it, and let you define the environment. Once you define the environment, we'll let you generate is a code, and then that code you can actually go and implement and build in your subscription. But the whole Azure environment landing zone is nothing but a piece of code which you can maintain versions. You can always say whenever you change it or expand it to add few things, you can actually redeploy it. It's very easy to integrate with your CD/CI pipelines and do it. So this is how we have thought about helping our customers and partners and helping them in scaling the landing zone. So again, always the first step of landing zone is to make the things simpler for everyone, is to select a framework. Like it's kind of a selecting what kind of house you are building. Are you going to build a single family house, or are you going to build a set of condos, or are you going to go and build a stadium or a bridge? What kind of things you are going to build? So it basically means that we give you option of like mainly like 4 things, where like CAF basic is nothing but Azure environment, which is typically designed to hold your test and dev workloads and to do some sort of a quick POC. So if you want to do a quick POC, you just want to have your test and dev workloads, not like any complex or production workload, then Azure basic environment. And typically it is 100% automated. You actually tell what kind of environment things, and it will just quickly build for you. The CAF foundation is where you start building your production grade workloads. So your first production grade workload, that's basically in case you're going to bring that, then we suggest you select Azure Foundation. And typically there is like 80% automation, the 20% automation that which we basically always try to do through maybe an interview call, or we call it a CAF workshop, where we try to revalidate your choices. So like, what kind of SLAs you're looking for, what things are critical for you, how do you go to disaster recovery, and why you are doing it. If you have not addressed those things in collecting the previous data, remember like 7 pieces of data is mostly like to reconfirming those things. And lastly, like in case you are building an enterprise scale means that you want to follow certain compliance standard. You want to follow NIST, or you want to follow, ISO 27001 or anything else. So when you start following third-party standards, you might have components which is beyond Azure. Then you enter into enterprise scale landing zone. And again, like that 65% automated, 35% manual. The manual part is again to reconfirm. You have to go and talk to customer, reconfirm, okay, this is how we understand security. And we are going to run security in the cloud based on this compliance standard. These are the best practices. This is how we're going to run monitoring. This is the whole cost structure is set up for you. This is how we are going to run the normal operations, the backup DR. So reconfirming all these with a customer very quickly, typically 4 to 5 hours of meetings required with different pieces before you go and build this. Where building is mostly automated. And lastly, custom, where you can select. Just to give you one more idea what we actually mean by these, using artifact from Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. You can see that this is like very simple graph, like architecture complexity to the compliance requirements. You can see that basic means like very simple, like so nothing complex, and there is not much things. This is like we go to basic, mostly test and dev workloads, mostly for POCs, and then the CAP foundation, which is like for your production workload, where you need definitely certain, you have to follow certain code best practices, and you have to commit necessarily. And lastly, the enterprise zone. So this is the first step. You select like what kind of landing zone you are building. You can always upgrade your landing zone. You may start from migration basic and expand to foundation, and then foundation to enterprise scale. You can always do an incremental, like it's not that you just one selected and you cannot change. Typically you can expand as you bring more and more complex load. The second step is basically add the selection of the compliances. And this is very important because you can always select like custom, or you can always say that, okay, I'm not interested in a particular compliance, but I just want to follow Azure best practices. But then you have to define like, then based on the basic, foundation, and enterprise, we will apply best practices, because the best practices for basic might be different for base practice of foundation, and foundation different from enterprise. So we apply best practices. Or you can select out of compliance standard. There are more than 30 compliance standards you can select today, and PCI, HIPAA, some of them are listed. Once you apply these, then you have an option of it will generate as your the deployment scripts, and you have option of whether it's a Terraform based scripts, which you can easily understand, modify as a code, or use your pipeline to deploy, or you can use Azure ARM templates or Azure Blueprint. So you can generate any of these three. So the whole idea is to do to basically, these are three simple steps. Select what kind of environment you are building, whether you are basic, foundation, or enterprise. Select what kind of compliance security you want for all these environment, and then finally generate the script. So the workflow of using the tool is very, very simple. Like it will again let you select what type of environment, what kind of compliance, and then it will allow you to generate. So this is a very, very simple tool designed to accelerate your landing zone, help you in bringing your applications and databases very, very quickly to Azure. The approach, which you can see, this is like we definitely do a prerequisite check. And that's the reason we say that the automation level is not 100% in all the cases, because majority of time we find that there are a lot of things fail in prerequisite check, and we have to talk to customer. That's why whenever you buy these products, you will get the list of questionnaires, like in what of the information missing. Either you can ask customer, they can provide you, or we can help you in doing that and building this landing zone. And this is so it has basically a workshop component which we actually trained our partner to do it. or we can do it for them for a couple of cases, and then build a landing zone scripts and documentation and training. So this is our product approach. But I'm trying to till now, like, we have defined what is Azure landing zone, why we need an automation, why it is so important, how we can do it using UnifyCloud tools. Typically, like, if you look at enterprise landing zone, it is definitely complex. And like, this is, for example, like enterprise landing zone that we have seen, like, as per the cloud adoption framework. And you can see that it's a quite complex. It need a lot of questions, answers, and other thing. You can always answer all these questions, or you can always say, okay, follow the best practices. Then our tool will show you what are the best practices to do it, and then it will go one by one. So going through these things, now I will just maybe share some of these screenshots from the actual tool itself. So whenever you land in the tool, it will ask you whether you are building a greenfield landing zone. Means that you don't have anything in Azure and you are going to build it, like, kind of thing, or you are basically building adding or improving something, or if you are basically trying to enhance an existing landing zone. So there are a few things you can ask, and it will, based on things you're planning to do. Currently, I'm taking a screenshot for like a greenfield type of environment. Once you select, okay, which type of these things, for example, if you select greenfield and you select, like, I am going to follow CAP framework, and then you select, like, out of basic, foundation, enterprise here. So these options are given here, which you can select. Then basically it will ask you to select, like, basic things, like, what's your Azure regions, what you're going to do, and a lot of these things are auto-filled based on the previous selection. So we help you to sometimes just click next, and you can do. And there are, like, certain policies also given here, and ask you questions and provide parameters, try to help you as much as. So when you build these landing zones, so as you go and answer these questions, then there are a few questions it will ask, and it will also give you values which we suggest. So you can take out the values what we are suggesting, or you can actually put your own understanding of compute and other aspect of these things. I have not taken all the screenshot, which I just captured few of the screenshot, but you may go into multiple screenshot based on if you want to answer these things, or you want to pick our questions and other things. You talk about a lot more about security. What kind of security architecture do you need? What kind of firewall? If you need a application firewall or database firewall separately, or you need a different security groups, other things. So these are, again, going deeper into security questions based on your selection. It may be very simple questions, or maybe some complex things. But for all the questions, we try to suggest you an answer or some guidance around it, so that you can easily add things. And then the questions around identity, what you're going to do with identity, how you're going to handle things, are they going to people come from outside, and other aspect of things. The questions around networking, mostly about, like, are you going to connect to on-premise things or just cloud only, whether you need a VPN, or what kind of VPNs we need, what kind of hub and scope architecture we need, what SLAs we're going to follow. So all these questions, again, the purpose of the tool is to help you in navigation through all these selections and help you in driving these things. Then definitely talk about storage, DR, and other parameters, and they will ask you questions. Finally talks about monitoring. Once you filled all the questions, or once you accepted all the suggestions given by the tool, it will show you, like, in one comprehensive thing, that this is what your landing zone specifications are. and one can always match this what they have agreed with the customer, and then you start deploying. You provide your tenant ID and other thing, and basically start deploying in typically like in a reasonable time, sometime like less than 10 to 15 minutes, it will generate the scripts. You can stop it and you can say, okay, just show me the scripts and other thing. I will deploy myself, or you can go ahead and let it deploy to these things. So the tool is fairly simple, but we do understand that there might be some situation where you need more and more help from us. You may ask questions. You can we can be with you on the teams and other thing to help you guide through process in these using this tool. But the whole objective of this tool is to make sure that we make the process of designing, deploying a landing zone a very easy task, a scalable task, and help people to navigate through different decision points and help them to take a particular decision to build a landing zone. Once they build a landing zone, help them also to expand it, because you may start building a landing zone with maybe test and dev workloads and other thing. Then you start adding slowly your first production simpler workload. Then you can bring your more complex workload like Oracle and then SAP, and then you keep building this landing zone. So it can be a progressive. Just a little bit on the roadmap for this product. Currently, we are following Microsoft Cloud Option Framework, but we will also start giving you some of the landing zone, a purpose-built landing zone. For example, like if a customer wants to implement Azure Virtual Desktop, so there's a landing zone for Azure Virtual Desktop, or a customer wants to run SAP workload. There's a specific, like, you want to run Microsoft special workloads or Dynamics. Then so we will keep adding some of these purpose-built landing zone as we move into next quarter, or as we go into after July. That's not far off. So these are like a little bit information about landing zone. So as I promised that I'm going to consume like around about 40 minutes, and then I will stop for any questions. I'm willing to go through the question answer, answer like if you have any questions or other things you want to understand.
Thank you, Vivek. And folks, please, if you have any questions, type them there into the chat. I do have a couple that I'd like to ask. Does the landing zone evolve over time? Once you set it up, is it kind of done, or do you have to manage it moving forward?
It's a very good question, Mark. So landing zone, that's I tell in all my discussion, it is kind of a like always evolving. Again, take analogy of your house, like you basically sometimes get a house from a builder where you like to get in, but as you get into the house, you like to customize it for yourself. So you add different things to comfort, and every time you live in, you always keep adding things, or remodeling things, sometimes even arranging things inside. The same thing, landing zone is a living organism. Like it will. You should always start with a small. You should start with maybe very small, first landing zone or basic, and then you expand it to enterprise. And then again, like you always add as you bring new workload. You have to add and improve your landing zone. You need to again improve based on the new enhancement which Microsoft is adding. So it's pretty much a living organism which keep evolving as your business requirements are changing, as your environment you are operating are changing, as your competitions are changing. So this is the pretty much a living and breathing organism which keep evolving.
Thank you. We've had a couple come in. Can a landing zone detect existing resources, or I guess can this tool, and maybe it's the our tool versus the landing zone, but can this tool detect existing resources in a tenant and incorporate them and quote unquote fix any missteps that might have been made previously?
Yeah, it's again a very relevant question. So the first release of our product is mainly serving the greenfield landing zone, where like everything built as new as per the code and all. But the second version, which is available and right now in very early stage to some customers, we are allowing partner to read the existing landing zone and basically incorporate it back to the new landing zone. And when we read a landing zone, and if we find that there are certain best practices are not followed it, then you definitely get a report. Like, you know, there might be multiple reports where we tell you that following anomalies or following issues which we see right now are these are real issues, or maybe you have taken because of certain reasons these are design points. So we highlight those points that we can basically understand what you already built, or you know what resource group, for example subscriptions, other things you already exist, and then incorporate it and build the fresh landing zone that you can deploy as a code. So that's going to be an enhancement in the next release of our tool. One thing I want to tell you, that in case you just want to analyze your current Azure environment and would like to see that what things can be improved or what anomalies are there, then you can use always our Cloud Supervisor tool. So Cloud Supervisor tool is available, and it's available for a free trial too. You can always connect to your Azure environment. It will generate a report for you that what issues, what security problems, or what things are undersized or oversized, or what things are unusual that you have done in your environment. So you can still generate that report today, but that functionality will come in next couple of months as part of the landing zone tool.
Great, thank you. And kind of, I think this might be a follow-up to that question. Is the tool idempotent, which I guess means can it be used multiple times, right? Can one landing zone be used for multiple implementations, if I'm translating the question right?
Yeah, the most important thing here to understand, and again, like that we treat landing zone as a piece of code. So it is basically a piece of code which you can always like maintain different versions, and you can deploy multiple times. You can always enhance. It is always maintained as a piece of code, and that's the best practice to deploy things on cloud. You should be able to deploy them. This will help you not only build the landing zone automation, but also do some lot more things like disaster recovery and all those things. So it's a piece of code. It can be expanded, it can be reused, it can be enhanced.
And where does that code reside? Is it in Azure?
Yeah, typically this code you can store with whatever like deployment tool you are using. So if you are using Azure DevOps, it can reside there. You can store it in a GitHub if you are planning to use GitHub, or you can. So it's kind of like it is basically integrated with any development environment, and then you can always maintain different versions, different branches as you typically do.
Okay. And then this is probably specifically about the UnifyCloud tool. Is it available to tier 2 CSPs or only those aligned to UnifyCloud?
It's available to anyone. Like I know I have not seen that this will be any CSP who wants to, or any partners who basically want to use these tools. It's available to everyone. If you are new to UnifyCloud system, you can definitely become a UnifyCloud partners, because we want to support you. The partnership is mostly to support these tools, to make sure that we do hand-holding with you in couple of engagements, so you can understand how the tool works and where what things to do and where need support. But this tool is I have, at least I'm not aware of on my side that any restriction, like this is available to all the partners or all types of partners.
Great, thank you. One more here. You mentioned the importance of dependency in helping with building the landing zone. Is that required, having that dependency data, or is it just a nice thing to have?
Dependency data, and is definitely, like, I put, like, based on your situation. It depends. Like, in case you are building a very basic landing zone where, like, you are bringing test and dev workloads, then no production workload, very simple things, then you might not worry about dependency because you are bringing everything together in one go. But the minute you start bringing your production workload, then you need to understand that what is it, an isolated workload? What other things you need to bring with this workload? How these application and infrastructure depend on other things? Do you need to maintain a hybrid environment? Uh, and whole thing. So that's why, like, without dependency data, you it's very hard to decide which thing to bring first, what are the related thing, how much traffic it will flow, what kind of bandwidth you need in case you are maintaining two environment. And so it's always better to have the dependency data for your planning, for your workload. Plus, that dependency data will also give you an idea that what kind of services you need to provision in Azure. For example, like, if your application need a complex authentication authorization, then you definitely need to run that particular Azure Active Directory services and plan, or you need to provide encryptions and like, firewall. If it is connected to firewall, then you have to bring and make sure the firewall is provisioned. So dependency data is, I think, if you are dealing with production workload, then you definitely need to have a dependency data. And moving forward, you always apply it. But if you are dealing with just test and dev, maybe a POC, you don't worry about if some parts of your application not working, then maybe you can ignore and proceed without dependency data. But in case production workloads, I highly recommend that you should have at least dependency data for application, not only for application, but your infrastructure. There are two types of dependency data, like, your infrastructure and your application dependency data. When I say application, I include the databases. So, like, you need to see dependency about like your infrastructure and application, and make sure that what connections they are making to other applications and infrastructure, whether those connections are SOP, like SOAP connection, or data connections, or what you can ignore. It's important to have dependency data in case of production environment.
Great, thank you. Getting back to the UnifyCloud tool, how is that licensed, and under what license does it exist, I guess? Knowing that we have multiple tools and this is a new one, is it a separate license?
Typically, this is definitely separate license tool. And the reason it is separate license, although I'm not a licensing expert, but I will try to explain. This is for those customers who are very serious in the migration modernization exercise. A lot of our customers start with basic data, and they are happy to know about, like, Azure cost and compare their Azure cost with their current costs, so the financial numbers, and they are happy to know what benefits cloud is going to provide, and they stop it there. Or some customers just want to see, like, what is the best strategy to move their applications and databases. So they want to understand whether they can move their application as app services, containers, or in VMs. And some customer would like to use all the data, and then they want to move to the cloud, and then they want to understand how to build Azure environment. So this tool is available as separate license, because initially you may only take license for maybe Cloud Recon and Cloud Pilot, because you want to do these things. And then as you are closer to your migration, then you add dependency and landing zone licenses to make sure you move. Given a chance, we want to sell all the licenses as one go to a customer, but, like, just in a practical thinking way, it is available as separate license when you decide to the cloud.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any other questions? There have been some good questions that have come in. Thank you for that. All right. Well, I think that's it, Vivek. Thank you very much for the thorough explanation of landing zones. I'll go ahead and wrap up, and I'm pasting in the chat there a link that you can click on to access a page where you can view some of our webinars, other videos, register for upcoming webinars, as well as schedule a conversation with somebody at UnifyCloud, whether that's a partnership discussion or just understanding more about UnifyCloud. And a timely question just came in is, how do you sign up as a partner? And I would suggest go to that bookings, schedule a partnership discussion, and then that'll get you in contact with the right folks. And let me actually share that on screen as well. I'll stop your screen sharing there, and I'll share. Yep, I'll start sharing mine here that has that same information. You can email info@unifycloud.com. You can go to our website for more information, and there's that link to schedule a bookings conversation. I'm sorry, a partnership conversation. So let me just double check to make sure there's no other questions. Hopefully that answered the last question about how to sign up as a partner. I don't see anything else coming in. So thank you everybody for your time. Hopefully you found value in this conversation. I know I did. I learned a little bit about landing zones, and thank you, Vivek, for sharing your expertise in the area.
No, Mark, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the discussion, and thank you for organizing all this. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day, whether it's the start of it or the end of it. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.